Wealth Strategies team to come up. We've got Rosemary to present him to us. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Andrew. I was standing for Sylvia this morning, who, as you know, is our normal speaker coordinator. Sylvia is currently floating around France somewhere and couldn't be with us, so as her buddy, I now have the pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We've got two Marks. We've got Mark Rattigan from Merideon Wealth Strategies, who is one of our sponsors, and his colleague Mark Nurse from Challenger Annuities. They're going to be telling us about the changes to the Centrelink and other interesting things for us. So hopefully we shall all learn something and save ourselves some money in the forthcoming year. Anyway, the first mark off the rank is Mark Rattigan, so I'll hand you over to him.
First mark off the mark. Okay. It's going to get confusing. We might just pop our notes up here. Let's do that. Can I grab the clicker? Awesome. I was going to say, is that Bob that wanted to do the morning tea? He was very enthusiastic, standing up, throwing his chair around. Did he get on the list after all? Alright, so thank you for having me back again. I just noticed when we transferred our presentation onto the computer, our presentation from 2017 is still sitting on the USB drive, so a bit of a blast from the past. So today, what we're going to do, there's new financial year's just begun. We've had a few major things that we thought were going to happen over this year with the election coming up that haven't eventuated, and I don't know, Ken Purnell, if your committee has been responsible for that or a small part, so congratulations on helping us keep your franking credits. So what I'm going to talk about is just give an update on where we're at the moment in the world, in politics, the economy and the interest rates and those sorts of things that are happening, and a little bit on tax. Ken sent me through some notes before the meeting on a few topics that a few people were interested in, so hopefully that covers off on anything you've got burning in your mind that you'd like to be covered off on, and we'll also ideally do a little bit of a Q&A session. Don't know if we'll do them at the end of my session then, Mark's, or we'll just do them all at the end. So if you do have some questions, maybe pop your hand up during the preso. I might jump to it. If it's a longer answer, we might leave it till the end if that's all right. So I'll pop while we're talking about that, pop our general advice warning up there. So anytime we talk, you're not allowed to take what we say seriously. That's not true. So take it seriously, but whether it suits your circumstances, you'll need to determine. So what we're going to talk about might not necessarily be relevant to everybody. So it's important to go, all right, what have I learned? What do I need to think about for myself? Not race out and go and do it yourself. So always recommend getting advice. And if you need a good advisor, well, you should be able to find one for you. So this is what I wanted to cover off on today. Now, are you able to see behind me, or would you like me to move now and again? So where are we now with the election happening and the surprise result? Where does that leave us? Also in the last month, or 6 weeks, we've had 2 interest rate cuts, which are wonderful for homeowners, but terrible for people who are retired and trying to fund themselves and keep their money safe. We're going to talk a little bit and cover off on something we did speak about last time as well. If was anyone here? I see a few faces I recognise, but hopefully I don't bore you too much. I'll reiterate a few things we went through last time about different ways you can invest your money, given that interest rates are even lower now than they were 2 years ago. What are some of the options, and what is the difference between what we think is a safe investment and what is a safe way to provide income for your retirement? And then we'll have Mark come up. So there's been some big changes on the 1st of July around annuities. Has anyone heard about annuities before? Do I understand what they are? Got a few hands, excellent. So for people who have Centrelink entitlements, or missing out on Centrelink entitlements because of the assets test, the rules that came out on the 1st of July should be able to see you get a boost straight away using the strategy that Mark will go through. So hopefully there's a little bit in here for everybody. So a bit of an update. So as I said, there was a bit of a surprise result in the election. For us, it was probably a great result. The other result would have seen a lot of changes to things like franking credits, tax, and also our industry and what we do from a financial planning point of view. So it did work out to be all right for retirees and people looking to create wealth. Whether it's a good result on all the other areas, though, is yet to be determined. But the good thing, I guess, as well, is there looks like there will be majority government, or they will be able to pass some legislation. There's been a long period of time now where there's been a lot of hung parliaments and very limited ability to do anything. So some good rules come up to the Senate and things like that, and then they get voted down or adjusted and changed or don't get through. So hopefully we'll see actually some legislation starting to pass over the coming years. So franking credits, as I was saying before, they're now safe. And I know there's an election coming up again in the future, but I don't think there'll be the same tax agenda that there was at this one, that they probably was the reason that they lost the election. So I'd say they're going to be safe for a while ahead, which is good news for self-funded retirees. There was a couple of good changes that came out in previous budgets, which are in place now. So the downsizer contribution, which is for anyone over the age of 65 who sells their principal residence, they now have the ability to put up to $300,000 per person into super to have that money invested and growing and earning some income for their future. So after the age of 65 previously, you weren't able to contribute to superannuation unless you met the work test. So we've also got an extra year now. So for all the young people in the room, between 65 and 66, you can actually contribute to super without having to be working, whereas after that, you do need to be meeting the work test. So the downsizer contribution, and that allows people to put a bit extra money into their super before they stop. As I said, even lower interest rates and possibilities for more. So even the US now is talking about dropping their interest rates again after putting them up a couple of times. So earnings on term deposits, earning on bank accounts are getting even smaller and smaller. So keeping up with inflation even is going to be difficult with the current levels of interest rates. On the flip side of that, we've actually got fairly good economies, fairly good markets, stock markets and things like that. So we've got fairly high priced shares and things in Australia. Properties recovered quite nicely in the property trust space. And we've also got most of the economies around the world who are actually doing quite well. So we've got to keep those things in mind when we're starting to look for opportunities for income. We've got to keep in mind that there are fairly high priced markets out there as well. Not all of them overpriced. There's probably one or two. Maybe the US is one that we're a bit concerned about. But on the whole, there is still some value and opportunity to be had in different markets. And as I mentioned earlier, so the new testing for what Mark's going to go through is probably the other big key for retirees at the moment that are affecting them. Now this was a request, so covering off on some tax implications in retirement. So for anybody who is retired as an individual, you have the ability to earn about $32,000 a year before you have to pay any tax. So the reason for that is there's the different offsets that you get the money back once you get over the tax-free threshold. There's the low income tax offset and the seniors pensioners tax offset, which allow you to have up to about $32,000 of earned income without having to go and start paying any tax on it. Also for couples, that's sitting at around $28,000 or $29,000, let's round it up, each. So there's some ability to generate some good income outside of your superannuation funds where they're tax-free without having to pay any taxes. So that's the first thing, making sure that your money's in the right spot and you have got it invested in a way that you're not paying too much tax. Every dollar you can keep is an extra dollar you don't have to earn, so it's very important. Hopefully there's some people in the room that this has affected, the $1.6 million pension cap. If so, that's a good position to be in. So a couple of years ago, the government brought out that anyone with 1.6 million or more in super wasn't allowed to convert it all to a tax-free pension. So there's a cap there at $1.6 million, which is tax-free, and then everything above that is taxable. So then it's about whether we hold it inside of your super fund and pay 15% tax, or whether you're better off using up those tax-free thresholds. Oops, sorry. There you go. No one told me. I'm reading off my notes and you're thinking, what's he talking about? So the tax-free thresholds that we're talking about, so if anyone is over the $1.6 million, then it's important to consider having some assets outside of your superannuation to take advantage of those tax-free thresholds as well. Now, one of the topics that Ken was talking about was whether the the death benefits tax. So there was an article recently in the paper that talked about how to deal with that. So I just wanted to cover off on it a little bit more. So basically, if you have money in a super environment or a pension environment, part of it is classified as taxable. So that's the parts that have come from working, so your employer contributions, your any money that you've put into the super fund, then claim a tax deduction on it during your working lifetime, and some other ones as well, but they're the main two that make up that component. The other part is a non-taxable or tax-free component, which is anything that you've put in after tax, so non-concessional contributions, if that rings a bell to anyone. If you've taken money out of one pension and popped it back into the other person's re-contribution, we call that, then they could be tax-free. So when you pass away, the money in your superannuation fund, if it goes to somebody who's dependent, which is your spouse, or I'll say there's probably not too many in the room with children under the age of 21, that you don't have to pay any tax on that. So if it goes to your spouse, you don't pay any tax. But if it goes to an adult child or somebody other than that's not dependent on you, then there is a tax. Now it's sitting at around 17%, which is your 15% tax plus the Medicare levels as well. So 17% to anybody that isn't dependent on you. So one of the options you've got to get around that, and that's what the article was talking about. So the parts that aren't taxable, if you have nobody to leave it to besides adult children or non-dependents, there's an opportunity to withdraw that, like if you know the end is 9, nice topic to be talking about on a Monday morning, and actually give that away. So it's important to find out about the rules around it, but if you take it out and give it away or pass it on that way before your death, then that tax can be avoided or reduced. So it's something to keep in mind. If you did know, there's also some rules around gifting and Centrelink, so you've got to be careful on the timing. So it's important that was what the article was talking about, that you don't just go, well, let's give it all away now, and one day I won't have to pay any tax for the kids. It is important to sort of get the timing right. And if they do have to pay a bit of tax, good luck to them, they're still getting some money from you, so I think that's still a win. So don't stress too much about that one. So the big issue at the moment for retirees is the fact that interest rates are coming down. So a lot of the time we try to be safe by having a lot of money in cash, term deposits and those safer types of investments. But the problem with that is as interest rates come down, the ability to earn money comes lower, and we're starting to have to spend more and more of our capital to get the same sort of spending power. So over time, we're actually going to have more chance of running out than if we took a little bit of risk and invested into things that do have a higher level of return. So a little bit of a retirement joke there. I think if anyone that was here last time would have seen this one as well. So can everyone read it? No? Right, so the king on his throne there is sitting talking to his wife, and he says, "That's enough of that, dear. Your penny pinching is spoiling my retirement." And she says, "Sorry, Your Highness, would you like your nest egg fried or scrambled?" So I thought that was probably even more appropriate this year than it has been in the past. Okay, so every quarter ASFA and the government come out with a report on how much it costs to retire. I don't know if anyone's seen these reports before and wants to give an opinion, given that you're the ones that are doing this. So let's pick on number 3. We're picking on number 3 here. So as of March this year, the new figures were for a single person to have a modest lifestyle would cost $27,646 a year. For a couple, that's about just under $40,000 now. To have a comfortable lifestyle as a single is $43,000, and to have a comfortable lifestyle as a couple is about $61,000. So I was updating these figures last night from last time I saw you, which I'm assuming is probably just under 2 years ago now, and I noticed that one was about 57, 58 last time we caught up. So with inflation, energy prices, those sorts of things, it has crept up. Now these are the figures for those based around 65. They also do a report on people aged around 85, and the numbers are a bit lower, so probably about 10%, from where they are there. So So I guess the challenge is the costs are still going up despite the interest rates going down. So what are we going to do to overcome those? So does anyone have any thoughts on those numbers? Does that sort of fit in with your experience, or are you all sitting on about 100 a year, having a really luxurious time on the QE2? Well, those people aren't here today, are they?
QE2.
Oh, okay, yes, that's a good point. Keep it under 80 to keep your Commonwealth Seniors card. Do you want to add that to your conversation, Mark? We might have a solution there as well. All right, 80's all right though, because you've got to think, if you've paid all your bills at 61, then the extra 19,000's all just for shoes and holidays then, isn't it? Yeah. Or not, sorry? Yeah. Got a shoes and holidays go down the back.
Absolutely.
So this gives us an idea of what those... Oh, sorry, yes? So if you have $80,000 assessable income, then you can lose your Commonwealth Seniors healthcare card. For a couple, sorry. Yeah. 85? There you go. So that's something you need to factor in, but there is some tools that you can manage that level as well. So Mark can have a chat to you about that later. So this sort of just gives you a breakdown of what those lifestyles are. So a comfortable lifestyle, replacing your kitchen and bathroom in over 20 years, better quality, larger number of household items, putting the air conditioner on, or the heater, dining out, fast internet connection, good clothes, domestic and occasional overseas holidays, top level private health insurance, having a reasonable car, and taking some regular leisure activities. So that's comfortable. So obviously, as I said, if you are doing a lot of overseas travel, those sorts of things, then the number would be higher than the 61,000 for a couple. Modest, so no home improvement budgets, limited household items, need to watch the utility costs, occasional cheap restaurants. Don't know if there's too many of those around, maybe McDonald's. Limited talk and text on your mobiles, reasonable clothes, and one leisure activity infrequently, so not as much golf and all those sorts of things. So what can we do about it, I guess, is what we're here to talk about and what you'd be interested in. It's all well and good knowing how much you need to spend, but how do we actually help you achieve that? So one of the things that we talk to retirees especially about a lot is this idea of safety. So having money that's low risk so that we don't lose it. Obviously, the less the money earns though over time, the more chance you have of running out sooner. So what I've done here, and sorry if it's a bit confusing, is the blue dots is having money, it says a 0% return. So this would be the idea of burying it in the backyard. So it's very safe there, we're never going to lose it if we don't put it with the banks and those sorts of things. But what we notice is a 67-year-old will run out of $400,000 by the time they're 79 if they're living on their usual lifestyle. So this is based on, sorry, I did have it written down here, $50,000. No, sorry, this is on the reasonable lifestyle that we had on the previous slide. So if we start moving that up, so we put in something that returns inflation, which is a bank account these days, then that might give us an extra couple of years. And the more we start to add things like shares and property and those types of things into the mix, the longer the money tends to last. Now the problem is the shares and properties will go up and down in value over time, and we'll feel uncomfortable that we've lost money and that type of thing. But what we can see there is over time, give it enough length of time, that having, so this is 100% in shares and property, so I'm not saying that that's what you should be doing, but we can see there at 87, we've still got half of the money still available. If we go down to 85%, then we've still got a quarter of the money available, and if we go down to 70%, then we're starting to run out at about 87. So you can see there an extra sort of 9 years worth of income coming in by taking on that additional risk. So the problem with that though is then we have the problem of the stock market going down or the property market going down or something like that for a period of time. So that's something then that we need to start to balance out. So rather than just go, let's go put all our money into the share market, and then one day, back in 2008, it's down 30 or 40%, and we're having to sell things at a low price to be able to afford to live. We've got to have different factors in place to make sure that we can survive during those times if we are going to increase our risk a little bit in the portfolio. So I guess we're looking at the risk of money being worth less and having to sell at a lower price versus the risk of income being less, which is what we're experiencing at the moment in our cash and safer investments. So on this graph, and I will move out the way a little bit here so I can talk to it and point. So on the left-hand side, so we talk about the volatility of prices. So when we hear the news every night, they talk about the All Ordinaries was up this much and the S&P was down this much, and that's what we tend to think about as risk and volatility. The problem though is with income, which is what we need when we retire most of the time, is there's volatility in that as well. So if you have a look at the orange graph, this is the interest rates over time. So in 2005, if you had your money sitting in the bank, you're getting around 4.8%. During 2007, 2008, those went up over 8%. You could get really good term deposits around then. That was a good time to lock them in. Then we see it come crashing back down to under 3, back up to about 6, and then steadily decreasing over the last sort of 9 years. Now, I didn't get a chance last night to do it, but there should be a little arrow down again here at the end because of the cuts that are happening at the moment. On the other side of that, so if you own a share, so an Australian share, these are, you can see here, yes, there's a bit of volatility in the income that you're getting from your shares, but if you have a look over the long term, they've been averaging around 6%. And now with the fight to save the franking credits, that's a very good level with some tax credits and things like that as well attached. So you can see, even though the share price might be going up and down over time, we're still getting a very good level of income from them. So as long as we're not having to sell them all the time to pay for our bills, then we can actually generate quite a good level of income there. So on the right-hand side, I added this one in. So this is a graph through Plato, one of the investment managers, and it's the chances of a dividend cut. So you can see here there's, that's around 10%, that line through the middle there. So back in 2009, there was a very high probability of dividends being cut when the share prices, when all the markets had collapsed. But you can see now they're actually saying in this report, which was November last year, that there's it's at the lowest point in 16 years of the chance of dividends being cut in their thoughts at the moment. So interest rates really low, dividends quite stable and higher. So there's a good opportunity there. And this is why they change the interest rates. This is the mechanism that they use, and why the RBA does this is if you're sitting in the bank getting 0.5%, 1% interest, and you can go, let's say with the ANZ Bank, you could go and buy an ANZ share and get a 6% return owning the bank rather than putting your money in the bank, then people are more likely to do that. So we're moving money out of cash, we're starting to put it into things that could drive the economy. So it's sort of the long-term process that they're aiming for. All right, jumping through my notes, gone ahead of myself. So what are the options that we've got? So if we have got money to invest for our retirement, what should we be doing with it? So we know burying it in the backyard, it's going to run out sooner than if we're actually earning some money on it. Cash, so this is inflation over the last 30 years. We've got cash going through this nice straight line through here. You can see back a while ago it was actually quite a nice steep line, but then it's slowed down, and since 2008 it's slowed down even more. So it's not a great way to earn across these days. So we can see these other tools. So we've got Australian shares as being the best performing over time, international shares, US shares. We've got bonds, property, those types of things. So you can see that, yes, in values they're going up and down quite a lot, but income wise they can generate a good level of return. But we just need to manage this volatility. So here's a few of those items that are around and things that you can have a look at. So cash, as I said, a term deposit maybe at the moment sitting around 2.2. Fixed income, so government bonds, mortgage funds, those types of things, probably sitting at around 2.8%. Property trusts, so investing in companies who manage portfolios of properties, whether they're shopping centres or caravan parks or buildings. Still doing very well. They've had a good run over the last 12 months. We think about 2% long-term growth and about 4.2% income. So comparing that to our cash account, that's quite a good result, 6.2. Commercial property, if you can go out and buy your own commercial property in the good times, probably sitting at about 7.1, bit of risk there, especially around the local area at the moment. Infrastructure, so this is owning things like gas pipelines or electricity grids, railway tracks, airports, those types of things. So quite a good stable contracted income source, sitting at around 4.9% income, and we see probably still around 3% growth projected as well. So that's a good little earner and fairly consistent in their income, because they do have usually government contracts and things like that in place that have some inflation hedging against there. So about 8.1%. So over the next slide, I'll put this one in bold, because this is if you had owned it inside a pension account. So in a pension you pay no tax. When you're retired you're paying no tax usually. So Australian shares, now thanks to Ken and his cohorts, keep their franking credits. So we can see there they pay out around 4% income. We still project about 3.5% growth, even though we feel things are going to slow down going forward. But when you add back the tax credits, that takes it up to about 8.8% annual long-term return. So there's a bit of an upside there from 7.6 to 8.8. So that's a really good opportunity for people in a low tax environment. Global shares. So global shares are good in a portfolio because they give us diversification. There's a lot of things we don't have in Australia as an economy. We've got lots of banks, lots of resource companies, but not much else. So when you go overseas, you can get access to things like Google and Apple, those types of companies, or the big medical companies and things like that. So there's some more opportunity out there. Now, I couldn't get updated info on our collectibles. I don't know if anyone in the room collects stamps or anything like that. Don't need to spend too much time on that. That's still our 2012 data there on those. Alternatives and hedge funds, and what we'll get Mark to talk about later is annuities. So annuity can give about, at the moment, for a 65-year-old male, about 4.5% cash flow for a lifetime. So it's not quite a return, but it's a cash guaranteed level of cash flow coming in. And this is what I was talking about before. So if you do start adding these things into your retirement portfolios, when we talk about the volatility of pricing and things like that, it is important to manage that. So you've got to have some approaches to do that, because if you did, when you're accumulating, so for myself, if we have a really bad year this year and then a good year next year and then a great year the next year and then a bad year, it doesn't really bother me, because every time I work, I get paid, I put some money into my super, it's sort of building up slowly. So the order that the good years and the bad years happen in don't matter too much. But in retirement, what we've done here is actually taken, 32 years of data, actual historical data, and we've put it in one direction, and then we turned it around and said, what if we got those in the backwards, in the reverse order? So you can see there, if we started there with a few good years, our balance builds up, we get a lot more income coming in, so we don't have to sell our assets to live off, and it means that by the 32 years down the track, we've still got as much as we started with. So that's if the order, when we start drawing money out, was favourable to us. If we got the opposite and we started with this part first, then we can see here we're starting to sell money, we're not earning enough to cover our costs, so we're having to sell down, and we actually run out at about 22 years. So it is very important, if you are looking at increasing the returns in your portfolio, that you do have some things in place to be able to manage this sort of risk as well, and that's what we'll go through next. So you would have seen this last time if you were here, or anyone that's spoken to me in the past. So this is how we would approach a retirement plan for your investments. So initially, what we don't want to have to do, if we are going to buy those things that are going up and down in value, we don't want to be forced to sell them to pay the bills if we don't have to, so especially while they're down. So they go into our longer term bucket. So we break some of the money down and we say, look, we need this to grow, we need it to go up and down, because we know that can get us a 7 or 8 or 9% return over the long term. But we can't have all our money there, because if we need to take some money out tomorrow, it might be down 10% or 20%. So we don't want to be selling that at a fire sale price. We want to be able to sell it and manage that when we feel like it. So we put some money there for the long term, and that's usually in things like shares and property, so that they can grow and generate good returns. And then in the good times, we can sell some of those and start to fill up these buckets. But we don't want to be forced to sell them in the bad times. So what we need to do to manage that is say, okay, well look, let's have 2 to 3 years worth of secure income sitting around somewhere, so that we can make sure that in the bad times we can live off that and use that bucket up, and then during the good times we can top it back up again. Does that make sense? Yep, wonderful. And then in the middle we want some medium-term income, so income-focused things. So ideally for retirement we just want money coming into our bank account every month, but especially in this part of the cycle, we do need to be getting some growth in our portfolios as well, because there's not a lot of income sitting around to be had easily. So that's sort of what we look at. We want to preserve our wealth, so we never run out, or we run out as late as possible. We want to have some lifestyle, but we also want to have access. So the other thing that this does is it gives us money if the engine blows up on the car, or we need an emergency trip somewhere. We can tap into this really quickly and easily. We don't have to go out and sell shares at the wrong time, or sell a property, or do those sorts of things. And what that allows us to do as well, so if we focus on our medium-term income strategies and things as well, so our baseline for all of us, or for all of you at the moment, is the age pension. So worst case scenario, we've got the age pension to live off. Now, most people would prefer to have a lifestyle slightly above or well above the age pension. So there's some options there. If you do have a pool of money to invest, one of the things that we look at, which is where Mark will come up and talk in a moment, is having an annuity strategy. So an annuity is an income for life, usually. So they're the ones we'll be talking about. So you give up a bit of your capital and you buy an annuity, and that says, we guarantee that we'll pay you an income stream for the rest of your life, or you're and your partner's wife if you have a reversionary one. So what we like to make sure is that when we talk to a client, if they've got a pool of cash, we say, okay, well, we don't ever want to be just on the age pension, so let's actually take out this annuity as well. So you'll always be on, when your other money runs out, you'll always have money above the age pension to live on as well. And then the rest of our funds can be in other assets, either in our name or in a pension. During our earlier retirement, we spend a bit more usually, and then as we get older, we tend to spend less. So as that money starts to run out, we end up with this nice baseline income that we're not just on the age pension. So I think that's the end of mine. Does anyone have any quick questions there that they would like, or any slides they want me to go over again? Just get me off the stage and get Mark on. Hang on, we got one finger. Last slide.
Now, you were suggesting that you get the pension, you've already got
Annuity.
Other investments? Yeah. So you have the ability to get the full pension, and Mark's going to go, I think this is Mark's second or third slide. So you get a full pension up to a certain amount of assets. So you have an asset test and an income test. So once you go over that level, the bottom level, then you'll get less pension, but you'll still be getting pension. And then as a couple, it's 856. Is that the correct number? Yeah, 860. So you can have up to $860,000 worth of assets outside of your home and still get a part pension. It might be $1 at that level, but if you have $600,000 worth of assets, you'll be getting an okay amount of pension as well.
Mark?
Another question?
Yes, sir. I just should talk.
Yes, regarding the price of shares at the moment, they are very expensive. Just at the moment, we've almost reached the 2008 level of 6,700 or 800. So there's quite a risk that they are likely to go down. Similarly, the United States ones, when President Trump came in, it was 16,000. Now it's a record high. It's over 26,000 in the last couple of weeks. Now, what's your long-term view in the next 6 to 12 months? Are we likely to continue that upswing, which you've been showing, or is there a very significant risk if we bought them today that they'll go down?
It's a very good question, and 6 to 12 months I would call that very short term, not long term, but yes, no, there's some good points, and that's where it's important to get, have a good strategy, sorry, standing in the light there, have a good strategy and have some advice around that, because there are parts of the market, so just because the economy's high doesn't mean that all the companies are high or all the companies are overvalued. So it comes down more to how much are they earning and what's the value, like we call PE ratios and things like that. So there's just because something is higher than it's been in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's expensive. So we do feel that the US is definitely is overvalued. There's pockets in there and companies in there that would still provide good income and good opportunities. So, and that's sort of another conversation, whether you're buying an index like the whole market or whether you're actually picking out specific sectors or specific companies within that, so that you can get the parts that you need, if that makes sense. So there's always opportunities in a market, whatever the price is. Obviously, if the market was down at 2,000 in Australia, everything would be cheap. So it's important just not to go, oh, let's just go and buy everything at the moment. But there is the Australian, most of the markets we're looking at the moment are probably fair value. US we definitely think is overvalued.
The other thing is we're talking about frank credits. A lot of those infrastructure type ones, their dividends aren't franked.
Yeah.
And
So
I think people need to know that if they're buying a share,
yes.
whether that is actually franked or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paper has got an F against it.
Yeah.
And I think you need to make that very clear as well.
Yeah, so we're just talking about whether something has a franking credit or whether it doesn't. So if its earnings are outside of Australia and they're not paying corporate tax in Australia, then usually they won't have a franking credit attached. So a franking credit, for those that aren't aware, is really if a company makes a profit in Australia, they pay 30% tax on that profit, and then they give money back to shareholders. So the money that's coming back to the shareholder is really with the tax attached, because you've got to pay the tax, not the company. So when they distribute it, let's say it was $1 of profit, they've paid 30 cents tax on it, so they will send you a check for 70 cents and a franking credit of 30 cents. So they say, well, here's the dollar we earned, we've already given the government 30 cents. So if you pay 0% tax, you can get your 30 cents back as well when you do your tax return. Does that make sense? So you do get that little boost. So in other countries, or different assets and different asset classes, you don't get that 30 cents back, but you might get it depends what the actual dollar. So it doesn't matter whether it comes back as tax credits or whether it comes in as dollars in the bank, you're paying no tax on it. So if you get $1, it doesn't matter whether it's got a 70 cents with a 30 cent franking credit on it, or whether it's just $1, you've got to look at what the after-tax returns are of your investments when you're making those decisions. So does that cover off? Yeah? Yeah. Yes?
Mark, there's also the risk I found that there's a tendency to sell off good Australian assets that are franked to overseas assets that then are not franked. And it seems to me we're selling off a hell of a lot of stuff we shouldn't be selling off.
Who's we, sorry?
Australia. Australian companies, Australian businesses, Australian property.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, that doesn't really matter whether it's franked or not franked. It's just got to do with our approach to international investors coming in and buying our good companies.
I know, but then it affects the investors in Australia because then they don't...
Not receiving franking credits? Yeah, I guess what they're looking at is the return to investors. So if they had a really good offer and they could sell their company for 50% more than it's worth today, then as an investor, you might go, okay, thank you, I'll take that 50% uplift and I'll go buy something else with it. So you could then reinvest that into a company that was getting your franking credits if that was important to you. But the board's job is to get a good return for investors. So if they can sell out to somebody and make more money than they're going to make over the next 5 years or something like that in dividends, then that's still a win usually. So
in the short term, yes.
Yeah,
Long term, no.
Oh yeah, well that's a different outcome. But yeah, if you can then take that money that you've made, the extra money, and reinvest it somewhere else, and get your franking credits and things like that. But yeah, we've got a very limited economy, and it keeps getting smaller rather than bigger because everyone comes and takes our good companies away. Yes.
Wouldn't you have to pay capital gains tax if those shares have gone up, and then the foreign company comes and buys it out at higher level, you
Yep.
have to pay capital gains tax, isn't it?
It's a capital gains tax event, but whether you pay capital gains depends on your tax rate. So if it's in a pension fund, no, because you don't pay tax. You have 0% tax. If it's in your name and it's under those numbers we said before, 28 or 32,000, and on top with all your income, then you wouldn't be paying any taxes on it. But it's the same, if you earn income, you've got to pay tax on that anyway. So at least with capital gains, you get a bit of a discount as well. So, but for most people in this room, hopefully, well, if you're paying capital gains tax on things, you're making a really lot of money. So you probably wouldn't be too concerned.
Well, you've got to try paying capital gains tax, and you find out it's not only capital gains tax you pay, it affects your pensions and your Commonwealth health cards and all sorts of things.
Yeah, so it depends what it is.
So it
So,
costs you more
yeah.
than just capital gains tax.
but yeah, so depending how you own it. So if you own investments and it's in pension, then it doesn't matter how you earn the money, you're not paying tax on it. It's just an amount. So if your bank account balance in the super fund or your pension went up, doesn't matter whether it's come as income or capital gains, it's going to have the same effect on Centrelink. So if you've got maybe a property in your own name or something like that and you sell it, then that could have an effect on there. But yeah, so usually if you own an asset and then you sell the asset and then you have cash sitting there, if you've earned a lot on the capital gain, you might pay some capital gains tax, but the Centrelink side of it, you should actually probably see an improvement because you've actually spent some money on tax that was actually sitting on your asset register before. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Yes, sir.
I read a column about people that are concerned upon and the amount of return you're getting is very small.
Yeah.
And if you're going to make a decision to it, do I put it out and put it into Australian shares, which are very much elevated, partly because a lot of people have been taking money out of term deposits and putting it into shares. There is a big risk that the value of shares will go in shares.
Yep, so that's what I was saying. It's not just to change that and do that. You have to have a plan, you have to understand valuations, all those sorts of things. But what we're saying is it's important not to just stay in term deposits because they feel safe. Like there is potential to generate earnings, even if the valuations go up and down. It's important to look at what's the income that we're getting from the investments and also managing which ones you're going into. So we're not just saying, yes, take all your money out, go into Australian shares because they're paying out franking credits or because they've got the best long-term returns. You've got to look at when. You might say, okay, we'll do a little bit into here and a little bit over here, and over time, start moving it away from that if that is the strategy that suits. So once again, it depends how much you've got. That's what I was saying before, general advice. If you've got $50,000 in a term deposit, that's everything that you've got, then hey, it might not be worth doing this because you need to have that liquidity and those sorts of things. So it's important to work through the different factors of what you're actually trying to achieve and what the risks are and everything.
Could you hold your questions,
Yeah.
please, until the end? And after Mark finishes, because you might cover some of the areas that you've got questions on, and then we can do a question time. If you do that for me, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think what we've heard with a lot of the questions only highlights the need to seek advice, especially when you're planning and selling assets and things like that. So, I think the things that Merideon Wealth Strategies can help you with in that planning stage. So it's wise to have a chat to Mark about those sorts of things. But anyway, I'm here to talk about Challenger lifetime annuities. So I do work for Challenger, have worked for Challenger for the last 6 years, have been in the industry for just over 25 years, working with AXA, National Mutual, AMP, and now Challenger. At Challenger, our sort of main vision and focus is to provide security in retirement. And we want retirees in Australia to be absolutely confident about the lifestyle they're going to have in retirement. And if we can play a role in your retirement as a small part of your investment portfolio, then we'd be pleased to play a part. In terms of what I'm going to talk about, again, just reiterating what Mark spoke about, it's general information only, it's not personal advice. I will talk about a strategy that will be pertinent to some of you in the room, and please, if you would like to investigate further, please do talk to Mark and the team at Meridian. Okay. In terms of this particular slide here, I'll just read it out. It says retirement, many moving parts and many unknowns. Okay. And for a lot of you already, you've probably been experiencing that, and some of the questions that you've highlighted thus far sort of I suppose, highlight the fact that there are many moving parts. In terms of, I suppose, the main message I want to get to you on this particular slide, if we were to take some key points out of this, there are no silver bullets. Okay? There are no magic puddings. It's basically planning is what you need to do, and you need to understand where your goals and objectives are, or what your goals and objectives are, and where advice can help you in terms of planning your pathways to ensuring that you achieve your goals and objectives and meet your aspirations in retirement. So clear thing is no silver bullets. I think this gentleman here indicated, and this gentleman here indicated, shares are at highs. If we go in, what's the risk? They could fall, but if we don't go in, no pain, no gain, so to speak. So it's about having goals and objectives and understanding how we invest and how we structure our portfolios to help ensure that we can deliver our goals and objectives. One of the things and you've probably seen this, if not in your own lives with friends and relatives, we need to be cognizant of cognitive decline, dementias and Parkinson's and these types of things in retirement. They're all going to present challenges. So if you've got share portfolios and you're managing those things by yourselves, how are you going to take into account how you're going to manage that going forward? And these are some of the elements of planning that come into play when you go and see a financial advisor like Mark. In terms of what the government have spoken about over the last sort of 5 to 6 years, these are a lot of the things that are on this slide here. They talk about risk pooling, guaranteed income, safety first, income layering, which Mark's already sort of covered. The government's spoken about a combination of products. In the past, we used to use annuities. They used to perform a large part of the Australian retirement portfolios. They lost their, I suppose, appeal when they lost some of their asset or concessional treatment for Centrelink. But I'm here to tell you that we're sort of back to the future. So with the change that the government's made in the rules for the treatment of annuities, for some of you in this room, there may be some opportunities to explore. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind as well. In terms of what's important to retirees, the government in formulating its policies takes into account a range of things. The National Seniors Association, some of you may be members, there's like 55,000 members nationally of over 55s, and they do a survey every year which Challenger helps to support, and in it, it talks about prioritising what's important to retirees. And in terms of these things, they talk about what's important or somewhat important, and what comes up, and if I summarise this, these are the things, the topics. Regular constant income for essentials, ensuring that my money lasts for my lifetime, being able to afford aged care and medical costs. These are all some of the important things for clients. So if we summarise it, peace of mind in retirement, is critical for a lot of retirees. Longevity, making sure that my money lasts my lifetime. Okay, so that's quite important. And health. Okay, everyone's health is important to them. So it's no doubt it would be important. What actually this survey also bears out is that, has anyone heard of the ski holiday? Anyone know what a ski holiday is?
Spending kids in paradise.
Yeah, good. So what that shows is that it's becoming less important, and the survey sort of backs that up. That a lot of you are thinking about, okay, let's have our lifestyles and let's prioritise our goals and objectives. The kids will get the house. Our money though is here for us to live in our retirement. And I'd support people to think about living their goals and objectives, because you're a long time in retirement, and if you can, while your health's still with you, if you can do the things that you want to do, that's fantastic. And as the survey bears out, the kids get the house. For those people that are in the position where they can have their wealth and pass on their wealth, that's fantastic. But again, it all comes down to your personal goals and objectives, and meeting those are the most important thing. In terms of the remaining part of the presentation, look, Mark sort of covered off, one of the major risks in retirement, and that is when we invest. What happens to our money? It's going to go up and down. And that's called market risk or sequencing risk, which Mark sort of covered off. There's also inflation, which is the prices going up, impacting the purchasing power of your money. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that in this session today, just in lack of time. But I want to really focus on longevity risk. So, and that's the risk that your savings basically expire before you do. Okay, so in terms of how we think about annuities, it's there predominantly to help you with the risks in retirement, but giving you that protecting for your essential income in retirement. Okay, so we'll come back to that in 2 ticks. But I just want to think about our longevity. So this is, I call this the Viagra slide, and I call this the Viagra slide because it's male life expectancy. It starts back here, back in 1905, where a male could be expected to live till about 76 and a half. Something happened, maybe someone put something in the water, maybe fluoride, back in the 70s, and male life expectancy took off. So if you're 65 now, how long do you think a male would expect to be living?
85.
Yeah, 85. Yeah, it's about 19 odd years. Okay. What about a female? 90. It's a little bit lower. It's about 87. 87, 88. But that's why women live longer. Everyone can see that. But being not joking now, but why are we living longer? What's the reason we're living longer? Just yell out a couple of things.
Health.
Medication, nutrition, healthcare, yeah. We're not smoking as much, we're not drinking as much.
Not about the drink.
Some of us, yeah. Someone forgot to tell me too. But look, medical improvements, scientific improvements all lead to higher life expectancy. And in Australia, we've got the fourth largest life expectancies in the world. Today's population, where 12% of the population are 65 and over the next 30 to 40 years, you've probably heard, expected to double to over 25%. So this presents some challenges for how we manage our portfolios, how we look at our investments, how we prioritise our goals and objectives, what's important now versus what's important later. If we're going to be living a long time, do we want to just be reliant on the age pension? Okay, so these are the sorts of questions that Challenger sort of brings to the market, and we bring our research and this particular slide here talks about, sorry, I just need to build it out. So if we speak about life expectancies, sort of around 84 and 87 for a male and female, well, what this is sort of showing is that for a couple, that you can actually live to 90. And if you add in life improvements, mortality improvements, so all these health and scientific improvements, that increases out to 93. So what it's basically saying is that, and if we think about the number of centenarians in the country today, so at the moment, around about 3,000 people, 100 and over the next 3 or 4 decades, that's predicted to grow to over 40,000 people who are above 100. Okay, so and think about it within this group here. How many people know someone? Yeah, there you go. So I've known 3, in my short lifetime, I've known 3 people that have gotten to 100. And, so it's going to be one of those things that, we do need to plan for. So not 20 years in retirement, but, 25, 30, 35 years in retirement. And what this is showing is that there's a 75% or close to 75% chance that you'll need your assets to last past 90. And there's actually almost a 10% chance, just over 9% to be precise, that you'll need your assets to last to over 100. So that's why I'm saying, we need to be conscious of how we invest, the structures we use to invest, and and prioritise our goals and objectives in retirement. Okay. This slide's a little bit probably too much on the slide, so I'll just summarise it. It just talks about age pension. So superannuation, how long has superannuation been around for? Anyone know?
40 years.
Just had an anniversary.
It's 25 years. Okay, so 25 years old now. So, yeah, sorry, compulsory, yeah. Good. Okay, yep, good. So the compulsory, sorry, that's very good, sir. The compulsory superannuation system, 25 years old today. Okay, well, not today, this year. So, what basically this slide sort of highlights is that it is starting to work in terms of helping people save for retirement. So what we have now is when people hit retirement, less of them are reliant on age pension as a starting point. That doesn't mean to say that they won't go onto age pension down the track, but less people are falling onto age pension. So with the demographics of the Australian society, where I mentioned that over 65-year-olds are going to double, whilst we've got less pensioners, we've got less people starting on pension, the actual pension outlay that the government's got is actually getting higher. Okay, so that's going to be an issue that the Australian economy is going to have to grapple with over the next 2 decades. So that will be interesting to see how they treat Centrelink going forward. But it's one of the things that does tend to form the bedrock of most people's retirement plans. You've paid tax during your working life, you've paid tax in your accumulation. Centrelink is one way of getting your tax back. So strategies to optimise and maximise your Centrelink tend to be quite critical in retirement planning, because Mark said it before, for every dollar you get back from the government, that's less you have to spend with your own money. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's one of the things we sort of look to do. The government sort of changed the rules around that, and we get the opportunity to, I suppose, arbitrage the rules or take advantage of the rules to help you with your retirement planning. And again, we're suggesting that you do that through the process of getting advice. This next slide, I think it's probably going to be too hard to see, so I'm just going to read out some of the figures. So I'm going to focus on single homeowner and couple homeowner. There are illness separated and non-homeowner screens up there. But basically what this does, this talks about if you're in this blue zone here as a single homeowner, you can have assets up to about 163 and you should get full age pension. Okay, full age pension as a single. Anyone know what that amount is for a single? What's the full age pension? Including supplements and energy supplement and the pension supplement.
On 69 a week.
It's about $24,000, just over. Okay. If you're a couple and you've got assets up to 286, you should get a full age pension as well, and that's about $36,000, just over $36,000. Okay. So the way to look at this slide, if you've got assets over 572, you lose pension. Okay. As a single, and if you're a couple, if you've got assets over $860,000, you won't get a drop of pension. Okay? You may still get the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, but you won't get an age pension and you won't get the pension and concession card. Everyone clear on that? Yeah. Okay. So what this slide shows you is, as we know, there's an income test, there's an asset test. You can earn income, you can work, you can get a pensioner bonus where your income's not counted. And what it's saying is you can have assets for a single between 163 and about 290 and be income tested. So you won't get the full amount of pension because they're going to income test you. Okay? So it's called means testing. Okay? So there's an asset test and there's an income test. Now I've got this joke from Centrelink. So why do they call it means test?
Mean.
Because you get the mean of the amount, yeah. So I went to a Centrelink seminar, I thought it was quite funny for a Centrelink officer to say that joke. So they means test you, and obviously they give you the lower amount. If the asset test says you get the lower figure, that's what you get assessed for. If the income test says you get the lower amount of pension, that's what you get assessed for. Okay? So there are strategies to help you maximise your pension. Sorry, I'll just finish off with the couples. So with the couples, between 286 and 423 in assets, financial assets, you'll tend to be income tested as opposed to asset tested. Okay? And then in this green zone from between 423 and 860, you tend to be asset tested. Okay? Your predominant test will be the asset test. So
we'll come back to those figures because they're important for when we look at the strategy. In terms of how do you improve your Centrelink, there are a couple of things you can do. They're sort of, they've been around for quite a while. Nick Bruning and Noel Whittaker write about these things quite regularly. The first thing you can do though is make sure if you've got a caravan out the back or a car, make sure you value that appropriately. You know, having it listed at $100,000 when it's worth, you know, 20, you don't need to put down the insured value, but you need to put down the market value. Okay, and Centrelink allow you to be quite generous in how you assess your personal assets, so your furniture and things like that. Okay, so make sure, you know, at the very least that you make sure you value your assets correctly. Okay. In terms of improvements to family home, the family home is an exempt asset. It's not counted towards Centrelink. So if you do home improvements, so if you spend $10,000 on your home, that $10,000 that you spent on your home is not counted. Okay, so that can help to improve your Centrelink. You can spend, you can go on holidays. You know, these are all things that are going to help to obviously, you know, maybe part of your goals and objectives. So do them because they're going to help boost your Centrelink. Okay. Obviously, take into account, you know, we don't want to run out too soon. You can gift. Anyone know the rules on how much you can gift? 10,000, 30,000 over 5 years. Okay, so if you go above that, what happens? They count it against you, so it's called deprivation. So they'll deprive that asset. So if you've gifted $50,000, that $20,000 will count against you for the next 5 years. Okay, but after that 5 years, it comes off the books, and you'll retain your pension. Okay. You can do funeral bonds or prepaid funeral expenses. A funeral bond, you can go up to about $13,000 each and get that exempt as an asset. If you've got a younger spouse below 65, you can shelter money, so you can move money from your super account to her super account or his super account. If they're under 65, that money won't, and it stays in an accumulation, not in a pension, that won't count towards your Centrelink, and so therefore it can boost your Centrelink. And you can consider an annuity. That's what we're going to cover off now. So the new rules came into force the 1st of July. What it does, and I mentioned before, we're sort of back to the future in terms of how annuities are going to be assessed. So back in 2007, if you bought a lifetime annuity, it was assessed for 50%. So you could buy it for 100 grand, but in the Centrelink books, it was assessed for 50 grand. Now, you can buy a lifetime annuity for $100,000. It's going to be assessed for $60,000. So a 60% assessment, and the income will be assessed for 60% of the payment. Okay, that basically gives us an immediate 40% reduction in the asset value. Okay, everyone clear on that? Now, that's from age. So you can buy that today, and up till age 84, it'll continue to have that 60% assessment, aka 40% reduction, and then at 84. It drops down to 30%. Okay, at 84 it drops to 30%. The only proviso that the government's got is that it's got to be a minimum of 60% for 5 years before it can drop to that 30% value. Okay, on the Centrelink books. So what does all that mean? So just break it down. So there's a couple of formulas on here that you just need to quickly understand. The way the asset test works, if you're in the asset test zone, in those green zones back on that slide a couple of slides ago, the way they reduce your pension is for every $1,000 over the limit, your pension reduces by $3 per thousand. Okay, if you multiply that by 26 fortnights, that works out at $78 per $1,000. Okay, so when we have an asset that gets, you buy it for 100, but it gets assessed for 60, there's a $40,000 reduction. So when we multiply 40 by $78 per thousand, we get an uplift in our Centrelink of $3,000, $3,120 to be precise. So if you did 2, you double that, and you get a $6,000 increase in your Centrelink. Okay. Now that's not to say that you should do 100 or $200,000. but certainly as a fixed income defensive investment, roughly as Mark indicated, paying for a 65-year-old male, we're going to start payments around 4,500 indexed for life, and then you can add the cash flow that you're going to get from the annuity on top of that. So it could be a strategy that you could look at, especially if you were missing out on pension now. It could help you qualify for age pension. Or if you're in the asset test zone, that green zone, it could help you optimise your pension, okay? But it's all relative to your goals and objectives. It's all relative to your total portfolio and understanding how it can blend in with your portfolio. In terms of the product itself, the way it works, we've got simplified rules for Centrelink, immediate 60% assessment, 60% assessment for income. The way the product works is, first and foremost, you want to understand you get a cash flow for life. So income for life. And the idea is that here I'm starting at 65 and I'm showing you in these income bars here, an income stream for life. The next concept you need to understand is you have access to your money. So in the past, annuities, a lot of people have sort of shied away from annuities because they've seen to be locking up your money. In terms of how we've structured the lifetime annuity, is you have access over your lifetime, okay? So, or for a defined withdrawal period based on your lifetime. So if your life expectancy for a male, for instance, is 19 years, we're going to give you a 19-year withdrawal period. A female will get a 21-year withdrawal period starting at 65. If you're older, then those withdrawal periods are longer, but your payments will be much higher. Your cash flow will be much higher. In terms of what happens if you die, 100% back for half your withdrawal period, based on your life expectancy, down to 50% from half your withdrawal period, out to zero over that period of time. So, to summarise, you're getting a guaranteed cash flow, as I said, starting around $4,500 for a male 65, indexed for life, access over your withdrawal period, guaranteed death benefit. If you die early, you're getting 100% back for that half life expectancy. So, and from a Centrelink perspective, it gets that immediate concessional treatment where you get that 40% reduction, which if you did $100,000 and you're in an asset test zone, could add an immediate $3,000 benefit to your Centrelink. So if that's important to you, then we'd encourage you to have a chat to Mark and the team at Merideon. In terms of, sorry. No, you can buy a lifetime annuity. So that's for the Centrelink treatment. Yeah. So you've got to be in the product. So you've got to purchase the product. Minimum of 5 years at 60%. Then it can drop to the 30%. Okay.
So I'm doing one. An 81-year-old, and he won't get that extra. He'll be 60% till 86, and then he'll drop to 30%, whereas everyone else will drop at 100%.
Sorry. So just to be clear, sorry. So I'll just quickly finish up, and then we'll be done. When you buy a Challenger investment, we operate under a life company licence. That means we're regulated by APRA. I know APRA's been in the news lately about, and the government's sort of taking them to task. One of the good things they actually have done is kept the system safe. So their prudential regulation has not been questioned. Where they have been questioned is on the non-financial risks like culture and behaviour of bank execs, etc. So the government wants them to do more on that. But from a prudential point of view, which is looking after the money, they've kept the Australian banking sector safe. No banks have failed, no life companies have failed since the GFC. So Challenger through the GFC, we sailed through. So yes, our share price suffered, but what happens is we have to put our money into what's called a reserve. The government then tells us how much capital we have to hold to make sure we keep the money safe. We've actually got to hold enough capital to withstand a 1 in 200 year shock event. And the GFC was a 1 in 74 year event. So if we have a 1 in 200 year shock event, guess what? We'll be getting a bottle of champagne out and having a drink, because a 1 in 200 year shock event would be quite catastrophic. On top of that, we're also holding another $1.3 billion on top of our mandatory prudential holdings. So we understand that investors want safety and security, and this is how we provide that guarantee by doing this, and we're regulated by the prudential regulator to ensure that we can do that. Last couple of slides. So just to reiterate, Mark put the slide up before. We call it retirement income layering. The concept is, let's look after our essentials first. It's a safety first approach to retirement planning. Let's make sure that we've got guaranteed income to give us that lifestyle above age pension. We don't want to be on $24,000 or $36,000 if something happens and we run out of money. What we want to be is, we want to have a cushion or an airbag above, the public safety net. Okay. So the idea is that you take some of your defensive cash or TDs, put some of that, not all your money, just some of your money into the annuity. It then provides you that cushion, that safety net for life. Okay. You've then got plenty of money in your account-based pension to take advantage of the dividends, imputation credits, to invest in growth assets. And if something does go wrong, whether it be markets, whether it because just naturally your investments run out before you do, you're always going to have this lifestyle above age pension. That's the concept that we're stating as part of that retirement income layering. And you're going to do this bit? Look, I think one of the things in those questions that we got earlier when Mark's question finished, it's about diversifying your assets. And from our perspective, you need to think in retirement about income, security, and growth. Okay, so sitting in term deposits and cash can work for a little while, and it worked back in 2008 when interest rates were 8%, but it's not working now. So how can we take small steps towards improving our cash flow? How do we take advantage of the rules? How do we generate the income so that we get to meet, or you get to meet, your goals and objectives for retirement? And if you want to pass on money to your kids, if that's important to you as part of your goals and objectives, then how do we do that by the use of growth assets? So I'll conclude there and get Mark back up, and then we'll take some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We're going to allow 3 questions because we're just nearly on the time limit now. Thank you. So 1 question. Dave? Dave, can you hang on a sec?
Here's the mic, so everybody can hear.
There you go. Okay, so when you retire, you've got quite a lot in your super fund. What's the best, to take out an annuity or an allocated pension?
Well, on the diagram we would say there, and what the government is sort of talking about, they're talking about a combination of a blended approach. So having an account-based pension and having the annuity. So the annuity we're suggesting is your safety blanket or your airbag above the age pension. Okay? So, but again, it comes down to goals and objectives. What are your priorities? What are the things you want to do? An annuity may not be suitable for every particular time. Okay?
That's what that's showing. So growth and defensive parts would be what sort of would be in a pension account or in your own name.
So these 2 parts here would probably still be left in your account-based pension. You can actually hold your annuity in a pension as well, but that's sort of the portion that would still be in the pension, and then you've got your annuity and then your age pension. Normally what would happen, and I've got some other graphs that would show this is a simplistic one, but the more you've got in your assets at the beginning, you probably get less age pension. So over your lifetime, it'd then creep up. So as this starts to go down, and as your benefits of your annuity kick in, then your age pension will start to creep up until it hits the max. So it's sort of a combination of all 3 that works best.
Yeah, my question is, with a $100,000 annuity, you're saying the return would be about 4.5%.
So it's a cash flow, yeah. So the return, yeah.
4,500 per year. That's fixed. Does that ever change?
So what I quoted you before was the index. So that's the starting cash flow, $4,500. It will index by inflation. So whatever inflation is that particular year, the payment will increase. Okay. So year 6,
It's
year
index.
10, for instance, it could be up, if inflation runs at 2.5%, which is what we use in our quotes for the illustrations, payments will be up around $6,000. Okay? So it's all relative to, we're not trying to be a growth investment, we're not a share. It is a safe, secure, fixed income investment. So when you've got cash rates at 1%, 1.5%, and you're looking for cash flow to help live the lifestyle you want, help put, food on the table, pay the bills, etc. This is where the annuity comes in handy as a fixed income cash flow investment. Okay, then by getting additional cash flow plus the additional pension, puts less strain on other parts of your portfolio. So you don't have to draw down on other assets like growth assets and shares.
Thank you, Mark and Mark.
Thank you.
M&M.
Well, thank you both very much. I think we all agree we've had a lot of information there, and we should all be rushing out and doing some hard thinking. But to help you guys with your hard thinking on behalf of our organisation, I'd like to give you both a bottle of wine. Thank you very much for a very interesting population. It's August next week, so you're okay. Thank you very much.